Today I'm sewing and sharing a dress and top pattern by Sewing in the City. This is the Vandam pattern. This pattern has two views that allow you to make it as a top or a longer dress with pockets. I'm making the dress version in this video so I can show you how I've applied the pockets, and if you're interested in making the top version, the instructions are the same and you'll just hem the garment without the pockets. The style of this pattern includes gathering at the front and back yokes, and a short invisible zipper at the back neckline for a nice polished finish in the back. And you can choose to style your top or dress with or without a belt. I've left a link for you below so that you can check out all the pattern details, grab a copy, and sew it along with me. Cut out your fabric, mark your notches, and let's get started. Apply interfacing to your neckband and your armbands. You should have two yoke pieces. One will be on the outside of your garment and one on the inside. Take the two back edges of your inner yoke back section to your ironing board. Press those edges to the wrong side of the garment by 5/8 of an inch. Now we're going to gather the upper edge of our main front panel. Use the longest stitch on your machine, basting from the top of one edge all the way across to the other edge. I'm going to be using about a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way across. And make sure you leave tails of thread on both sides so that you have threads to pull for gathering. Grab your outer yoke piece, the yoke piece that we did not press the back sides for, and mark the center front with a pin. Now I'm going to place that outer yoke piece right sides together with this bodice piece, matching the centers and pin in place. I'm also going to pin the edges together on both sides. Then I'm going to start pulling the gathering stitches on the top of my main front so that the main bodice piece fits the yoke from pin to pin. Once those gathered sections fit into the yoke and your gathers are distributed evenly, go ahead and pin. I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and baste from one end all the way across to the other with about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now grab your inner yoke piece, place the inner yoke right sides together with the wrong side of your main bodice piece. So the main bodice piece will be sandwiched between the inner yoke and the outer yoke that we just sewed to it. Pin together all the way across. Now take it to your machine and sew from one end all the way to the other with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Now that I have both of my yokes attached to my main front piece, I'm going to trim this seam by about half. Then we can lay both yoke sections out flat and give this yoke a really good press. After you've pressed this seam, you also have the option of top stitching this yoke just above your original stitching line by about 1/8 of an inch all the way across. Grab one of your main bodice back pieces, and we're going to baste across the upper edge just as we did for the front piece. Now I'm going to take the back section of my outer yoke piece, and again I've marked the center with a pin. I'm going to match it right sides together with the top center of my back bodice piece. Make sure that you're attaching your correct yoke side to your correct back bodice side. Here I'm attaching my left back yoke to my left back bodice. Pin in place at the center and the corners. And then gather those edges and pin in place just as we did for the front bodice. Sew in place with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Now that you have your outer yoke piece attached to your main back piece, I'm just going to trim it by about half. Now with my back yoke and my back skirt opened out flat, I'm going to flip over my corresponding inner back yoke piece and take that folded edge that we pressed earlier and place it right over this seam so it just covers our stitches. And pin in place all the way across. You have the option of slip stitching your yoke on the inside all across this seam, but a faster process would be to stitch in the ditch from the front of your garment all across this seam, placing your needle right inside this seam line and stitching all the way across. And as you stitch, periodically check underneath to make sure you are catching this inner yoke as you sew across. And follow the same exact steps on the other side to attach your opposite back skirt to your opposite back yoke. To prepare for installing our neckband as well as the back zipper, first we're going to take this neckline to the sewing machine and baste both layers together all around. Then we want to finish these outer raw edges of both of our center back pieces. I'm just going to take it to my serger and serge all the way from the top neckline to the bottom hem. I'm going to do this for both my right and left center back pieces. For your back neck opening, the instructions call for a 9-inch invisible zipper. I'm going to open my zipper. I'm going to take it to my ironing board and press the coils so that they open out flat. Do this on both sides. Now with the right side of my left back center front facing me, I'm going to take the left side of my zipper tape and place it right sides together with my left center back. I'm going to place the zipper so that the very top is flush with the neckline. I'm going to pin the zipper in place from top to bottom, making sure that the zipper teeth are 5/8 of an inch away from the serged edge of my center back. Once it's pinned in place, I'm going to take it to my sewing machine, and using my zipper foot, I'm going to position my needle as close as I can to the zipper teeth, and I'm going to stitch close to those teeth from the top of the zipper all the way to as far as my presser foot will allow me to get to the bottom of the zipper. Now that I have the left side of my zipper attached, I'm going to attach my right zipper tape to the right side of my bodice in the same exact way, matching up the top edge of that right zipper tape with the neckline, and pinning that tape in place so that the teeth are 5/8 of an inch away from the edge, and then sewing that in place all the way down. Now that I have that zipper fully installed, I'm going to turn this garment inside out. I'm going to pin the center back seam together from where the zipper ends all the way to the bottom of the hem, moving the zipper out of the way so that I can pin all the way to where the zipper stitching ended. Now to finish sewing our center back seam, I'm going to sew the first 2 or 3 inches still using my zipper foot. This way I can get the needle as close as I can to those zipper teeth where the zipper stitching ended. I'll sew with a 5/8 inch seam allowance for a few inches and then change back to my regular presser foot and continue with a 5/8 inch seam allowance all the way to the bottom of the garment. Take your neckband to your ironing board and fold it in half wrong sides together. Also fold up one of the long raw edges to the wrong side by 5/8 of an inch. And then mark the center of your neckband with a pin along the unpressed raw edge. Match the raw unpressed edge of your neckband right sides together with your neckline, matching your centers and pin in place. Take that serged edge of your center back and fold it to the inside of your garment so that only your zipper teeth are exposed beyond that center back. Then we're going to pin the short edge of our neckband in place with the center back, allowing the neckband to extend 5/8 of an inch beyond that folded edge of the center back. And do this on both sides. And now you can continue pinning that neckband all the way around. If you find that the neckband is not easing nicely into that neckline, take your scissors with you to the sewing machine and clip into the neckline as you sew, just as far as the stitching that we made earlier when we attached the 2 pieces of the yoke together, so that you don't clip beyond the seam allowance. Those clippings will give you the ease that you need to fit the neckband into the neckline perfectly. Stitch the neckband to the neckline all the way around with a 5/8 inch seam allowance. Now that I've attached the neckband, I'm going to trim this seam allowance by about half. Then I'm going to open out that neckband flat, take it to my ironing board, and give that neckline seam a really good press, pressing this seam allowance toward the neckband. Now I'm going to take the raw folded edge of my neckband that we pressed to the inside earlier and place it over that neckline seam so that it just covers those stitches, just as we did with the back yoke earlier, and then pin in place all the way around. When you get to both of your center back edges, you're going to take this tape that's extending beyond that center back fold, tuck it to the inside just along that seam allowance, and then turn this top folded edge over top and pin in place. And do this on both sides. Now I'm going to take this to my machine and stitch in the ditch of the original seam line all the way across. Again, periodically checking underneath to make sure that I'm catching the inside of my neckband as I sew. At the top center back edges of your collar, you also have the option of adding hook and loops. And using a needle and thread, I'm going to sew them both in place, sewing them both to the inside collar so that the stitches are not visible from the outside. So here is what the hook and loop look like at the very top of my back collar. Take your pockets to your serger and finish the outer edges as well as the outer curves, and do this for all 4 pockets. Also finish each side seam for your front and back bodice separately. Now we're going to attach our first pair of pockets to our front bodice piece. Place one of your pockets right sides together with your front bodice, matching your notches, and pin in place. Do this at the other side seam as well with the corresponding pocket piece. Now take these pockets to your sewing machine and sew with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And repeat for the matching set of pockets to attach them to your back bodice piece. Now that I've sewn the seams for each pocket, I've opened out the pockets flat so that they're opened up over their own seam, and I've pressed this seam, and I've done this for each pocket. Now I'm going to place my front and back pieces with their pockets right sides together, and I'm going to pin together the side seams and the outside edges of each pocket. Now we're going to sew our side seams from the top to 5/8 of an inch below the top of that pocket. Then we're going to pivot our stitching and continue with our 5/8 inch seam allowance all around the edges of this pocket, and we're going to sew past that serged edge by 5/8 of an inch and pivot to continue the 5/8 inch seam allowance to the bottom of your garment. Do this for both side seams for both pocket sets. For the bottom hem of my dress, I've gone ahead and serged the entire bottom raw edge all the way around. And try on your dress to determine how much of a hem you want. I'm just going to turn my hem to the inside by about 1/2 of an inch and edge stitch close to my serging stitches all the way around the bottom of my dress. Take one of your armbands to your ironing board and press one of the long edges to the wrong side by 5/8 of an inch. And open out that fold, and fold this armband right sides together, matching the short edges, and pin in place. And sew that short edge with a 5/8 inch seam allowance and press your seams open. Now match the raw unfolded edge of your armband right sides together with your armhole, matching your underarm seams, and pin in place. And then continue pinning all around the armhole, matching your notches. Sew your band to this armhole with a 5/8 inch seam allowance all the way around. Trim this seam allowance, and then open out your armband and fold it in half along the crease you created with your iron. Just as we've done before, we're going to take this folded edge of the armband and place it right on top of our armband seam so that the fold just covers those stitches, and pin in place all the way around. Now that I have the inner fold of my armband pinned all the way around, I'm going to take it to my sewing machine and stitch in the ditch all the way around, once again periodically checking as I sew to make sure that I am catching that inner fold as I go. Repeat all of these steps to attach your other armband to your opposite armhole. Now give everything a good press and you're all done. Thank you for watching this sew along. Make sure you check out my other videos for more great sewing inspiration, and I'll see you in the next video.